Welcome back to Office Hours Unplugged, where we chat with researchers and PIs here in McMaster. Today we bring with us to the studio Dr. Joe Kim. Thank you so much for being here. Could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Okay, hi. Thanks for having me. I'm Joe Kim. I'm a professor of psychology, neuroscience, and behavior. I direct the Education and Cognition Lab, and I teach our large introductory psychology courses with Dr. Cadieux. And I'm also the academic director for the McCall-McBain postdoctoral teaching and leadership program.
Nice. And just kind of taking it back to the very beginning, what kind of sparked your initial interest in psychology and neuroscience and education research broadly?
So for me, I think my first exposure to psychology was when I got to university. Mm-hmm. So I took introductory psychology, and I was just fascinated by the types of questions that were being asked. And even now, as a instructor for the course, what I tell students that I find to be most fascinating about psychology is that first, the questions that we ask are questions that philosophers and intellectuals have been asking for thousands of years. But we're very young science relative to other sciences. And it's really exciting for me at this stage because I feel like we're still at the ground floor.
Right.
There are still groundbreaking discoveries to be made, and we now have really amazing tools to answer some of these questions that we're interested in.
And was there like a specific experience or mentor that really solidified your passion for this field?
Yeah, I would say in my second year, I took a course on learning and conditioning with Shep Siegel. Mm-hmm. And I found the whole course really fascinating, that they broke down this question about how do organisms learn, and just the beauty of the experiments and how things were designed to try to understand principles of learning. And my favorite section in that course was learning about how learning and physiology interact for maintaining homeostasis in our body. And one of the applications was learning about drug addiction. Mm-hmm. And the impact of drug effects and how learning and physiological regulation interact. And there were a lot of experiments we talked about that featured Shep Siegel. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even realize at the time that that was my instructor.
Wow.
Right? And so amazing. Then when I made the connection, I was just absolutely fascinated. Like, wow, this person right in front of me, he's the person that's been doing this research. And then actually that inspired me to go on to do grad work. And so I did my PhD with him.
Oh. And would you say that's like a benefit that, like, this field is kind of new? Like, there's so much to like explore, to discover, and that kind of evokes more passion in, researchers who are interested in this field, right?
I think so. So I tell my class too that there are people in this class that are probably going to make significant contributions, groundbreaking discoveries in psychology. And like I said, we have these amazing tools now. And like, I'll just cite one example. So in the psychology building at McMaster University, we have this facility called the Live Lab, mm-hmm. Large Interactive Virtual Environment Lab. It's a 130-seat performance theater mm-hmm. with virtual acoustics. So first of all, I can just use an iPad and change the acoustics of the entire theater. So it could sound like a small classroom. It could sound like a busy restaurant. It could sound like any concert hall in the world.
Amazing! Wow.
It's with just the touch of a button. That's pretty amazing. The next part that's really amazing is that of these seats, 40 of them can be wired so that you could measure any physiological measure that you can think of. So, for example, we could measure EEG. We could measure brain waves of 40 people while they're experiencing a concert.
Oh my God.
We could measure galvanic skin response. We could measure heart rate. We could measure motion capture. So here's an application. I'm interested in what are the conditions that lead people to be engaged and pay attention during a lecture. So instead of just being in some small computer booth, we can have people in an actual lecture hall listening to an actual lecture. And then instead of just asking them, are you motivated? Are you paying attention? We can look at EEG, galvanic skin response, and heart rate variability as a neurophysiological signature of how engaged and how well they're paying attention. And we could even compare that to what they self-report.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
So it's almost like futuristic.
Yeah.
And so not that long ago, when people were measuring things like mind wandering, so this is connected with attention. So while you are trying to pay attention on a primary task, at some point your mind's going to start wandering and drift to secondary tasks. Like, what else do I have to do today after this interview, right? And so how do you measure that? So typically you just have a sound beep periodically and just say, hey, just a few moments ago, were you paying attention on a scale of 0 to 100? Right? So just kind of introspection. And there's a lot of problems with that. But now we have these amazing neurophysiological measures that we could match up to see how well they are actually paying attention.
It's amazing.
That is amazing. The research facilities and things here in McMaster, in my opinion, are just unrivaled, like genuinely in every department. But I had no idea what the live lab was. I'd always pass by it, but
you should check it out because they have all sorts of public events where they have musicians, they have concerts, and they typically involve the audience, right? So, for example, when you have musicians playing together, especially if you have a type of music like jazz where there's a lot of improvising, it's really interesting to see at some point, they become synchronized with each other. So they're if you measure EEG, they become synchronized with each other. And then if you have like a audience that is like trained in music, it's interesting to see the synchrony that can emerge with the audience. There's also something really interesting about listening to live music that's different from hearing a perfect audio reproduction, right? So you could probably get a better music quality experience from listening through really high quality headphones. But there's something different about going to a concert, going to a live lecture. There's something different. The interactions with people around you, probably brain synchrony is part of it. There's some social facilitation. So this is a perfect facility to measure this group dynamic interactions.
Right, especially when there's like so many different factors, and now you have the live lab that's able to capture so many different, measurements, which is amazing.
Yeah. So we have people have been wondering about how do group dynamics affect performance. How accurate are our memories?
Right.
Is the world the way that we really experience it? These are all kind of like philosophical questions that are now really grounded in science as well. And so we can do some really interesting things.
Wow. And that's really great to hear. And I just want to understand, like, going back in your own educational journey, the place where you did your bachelor's, what university?
So I did my undergrad at McMaster University.
Oh, wow. So, and then you did your
and
PhD
then I
here.
stayed to do my PhD with Shep Siegel. And then I went to San Francisco. So I was at University of California, San Francisco for 6 years as a postdoc and as a research scientist. And then I came back to McMaster for my current position.
Wow. And has your sort of perspective on education and teaching changed since you've come here and actually started teaching your own classes, and how has your research kind of influenced that?
So the way that I learned as an undergrad is very different from the way that I'm teaching introductory psychology, for example. So when I was an undergrad, the classic course setup, undergrad course setup, was there 3 lectures a week. And the reason why you go to lectures is that's where you get all the information for the very first time, right? And I think it was generally a variable experience, so it depends on the quality of the lecturer, how good is the lecture, how well organized is it, how engaging is it, right? And then how prepared are you? And if the lecturer says a term like dorsolateral and you don't know what that is and you're trying to figure out what that is, and you might be lost for the rest of that lecture. But that's just the way that lectures were. The way that we teach introductory psychology is using this blended learning model that I set up when I first got here at McMaster in 2007. So been developing it since 2007. And the whole point of this model is that all that primary course content we deliver through web modules. And the whole point of that is that so students can engage in self-paced learning so that they can go through things maybe more than once. And so especially when we cover very complex material like the action potential, I actually even say within the web module, I have this joke, like, unless your name is Hubel or Weasel, this is very complicated stuff, and I would suggest you go back through this unit again. And I think that's the whole point, that you can go through this at your own pace to learn all the primary course content, the facts, the theories, the terms, frankly, the things you just have to memorize, right? This sets you up for an engaging lecture experience. So I think about the lectures that we give in MacIntroPsych, in some ways almost like a TED Talk. Like, here, why is it important for you to know about the action potential? Why is it important for you to learn about competition and cooperation? So I always try to create memorable events during the lecture, things that students are going to be talking about after the lecture. We always have interactions, activities, demonstrations. We'll do live experiments in the lecture. And I'll always try to connect with interesting current events or very contemporary research to show students why are we actually learning this. And then that also sets them up for their small group tutorial, where there's only 20 to 25 students. So even though we're this gigantic intro class, this tutorial is probably the smallest classroom experience that most first-year students have. And then all these tutorials are led by amazing undergrad TAs. So we have about 250 applications every year for about 20 new spots, right? And so it's very, very competitive to get into. These are the best students. And then these new TAs, they take a course with me in the fall semester called The Science of Teaching and Learning. So they learn all about the theory and the practice of teaching. And then every week, we actually even preview the upcoming week's tutorial together. And so they go into their tutorial, they really know their material. Right. And I think the course evaluations really reflect that. People really always remember their intro psych TA. I don't know if do you guys remember?
I do, yeah.
I forgot the name, but I have a picture perfect image in my head.
They really know what they're doing.
Exactly.
Right? So I think our TAs are the most highly trained TAs on campus, and they love their job. Like, they're part of a learning community. So, we invest a lot of time and energy and resources into our TAs. And so that's the whole model.
Right.
And then, so I teach this giant intro psych class, but I also teach this very small third-year class for only 20 students, the new incoming MacIntroPsych TAs.
Wow.
And all of their work in that course is done through group projects. But I tell them at the beginning of the year, these are the best groups you'll ever be in for the rest of your life, because each of you was hand-selected to be in this class.
And, going back as you're talking about MacIntroPsych, I'm curious, has there been times where you've modified the course based on your own research, because you're doing research, and you've discovered something and you kind of wanted to test it and see if it actually worked in practice?
Yeah, so I'm very interested in using evidence-based practices to improve the teaching and learning experience for our students. And sometimes we have ideas that we think would be great. So, for example, instead of having weekly quizzes, we thought, what if they were like pop quizzes? Like you just never know when they're going to be. In theory, it sounds like a good idea. It could even be like on a variable ratio schedule, right? So that people are always kind of ramping up their studying. In practice, there were problems with just administration, people saying, oh, I was sick that day. And when you have thousands of students, and just overall, the morale was down. People just didn't like it. And fair enough, right? And so we did try that one year, and then we thought, you know what, this is not working. And so look at the data of how people don't like it. And so we got rid of that.
Right.
Here's another interesting idea. So, the web modules, how there are sections where there's like a video of me or Dr. Kadu like speaking on a video directly to the camera. The question I had was like, is it necessary to have that? And the reason why is that from a pure pedagogical research perspective, if you have other information on the screen while the person is speaking, it could be distracting. You look, where should I be looking? Looking at the person talking or looking at the important information being presented? So originally, when I had the web modules, it was just kind of random where there was a video and where there wasn't. And there may or may not be important new information on the screen. And so one year, I decided, I'm just going to get rid of all the videos. So it's just audio, right? And it was really interesting. So we collect feedback on everything, including the web modules. That year, the feedback on the web modules was lower than the year before, like significantly lower. But nothing had changed. It's the same audio. It's just that we removed the videos. Even the jokes weren't as funny.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that's really interesting. So and then I looked through the comments, and then people felt like they were not connected to the narrators of the web modules, right? So then I realized, you know what? It's important to have the videos in, but I don't want it to be distracting. And so what I ended up doing was that each web module is divided into, say, 5 or 6 units. The videos are only present at the intro and conclusion of each unit. And for the bulk of the unit, there's no video where all the key information is being presented. But what we realized was that was enough of having videos where people still felt connected, and the evaluations for the web module went right back up. And overall, I thought it was a much better pedagogical decision.
Right.
Have videos, but they're only at the intro and summary. And then during the core content, there's no videos, it's just audio. And people probably don't even realize that until I'm telling you right now. There's not that many videos in the web modules.
It's really amazing. I mean, I didn't realize that myself. So just hearing about that now is just like, there's so much background work that's being done. I think all the students really appreciate that. I think you can probably tell from the course evaluation.
Yeah, so we're we're at a point where we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Right. But I will tell you, the first few years I was running the course, the web module quality was not as good as it is now. Learn from experience and learn from research how to improve it. And it's been gradually improving. And at this point, we don't have to make major structural changes, but we are constantly making additions. One of the big kind of fun things that we're doing is that you may recall that on some of the web modules, there's like a mini movie.
I do remember that.
Yeah, there's like a mini movie that's at the intro, the middle, and at the end that kind of arcs the story of the web module. Eventually, every single web module will have that. And so every summer, what we try to do is film at least one new one. So we're planning to film a new one this summer, probably for form perception. And so I think it just kind of adds just another fun, engaging layer to the web modules.
For sure, yeah.
I mean, I can find some humor in the fact that you just have like a constant, endless supply of like people to test new like techniques on, and it's a very like interesting and unique position to be in, where you can like actually use these evidence-based methods and see them in practice and see relative to each other how they change the experience for students. I find that quite amazing. Yeah.
Then I like the most interesting findings I will tell the students directly about.
Yeah.
So for example, when we first moved to having weekly quizzes, how do you have weekly quizzes for thousands of people, right? Has to be online, right? And what I wanted to do early on is I didn't want to pretend that people are going to just be doing it by themselves. Like I'm completely like connected to reality here. So it's like an assignment.
Right.
And so I decided to tell students, yeah, you can do it in groups, right? I don't want it to be like a secret. You can definitely do it in groups. I think you could learn a lot, especially if there's like a challenging question and there's two students kind of like debating and arguing over what it should be. I think there's a lot of learning involved there. So I asked the bonus questions to try to understand this behavior. So I asked, do you write the quizzes generally on your own or with other people? And then what is your role if you work with other people? And it ranged from like, I don't do that much to a lot, but I carefully worded it. And what we found was that about half the people reported doing most of the quizzes on their own for various reasons. More convenient. I don't know anyone. I just prefer it. But the half the people that did them with other people, they broke into various groups of how much they're contributing. So
Right.
I'm sure there's some people that do nothing, and people just say, that's the answer, right? And there are some people that are really leading the charge. So we can track their grades based on this self-categorization. So not surprisingly, if you write the quizzes in groups as opposed to by yourself, overall, bit of a higher grade. That makes sense. What's interesting, though, within people writing it collaboratively, those who do put in more effort overall get better grades, even during the weekly quizzes. That might be, maybe you change groups, and if you're always trying hard, you're going to do well.
Right.
That could explain things. But the real test was, how do you do on the midterm and the final exam when you are on your own? That's a true reflection of how much you've actually learned. If you did the quizzes on your own, it completely predicted how you did on the midterm and the final exam. That makes sense, right? Because they've already been doing this on their own. But the categorization within the collaborative, those who did the least contributions, they did the poorest. Right. They did very poor on the midterm and the final exam. And those who contributed the most, they did the best.
Right.
So I show this data to my students and I say, no one's watching you. You can do whatever you want, but you should think about the weekly Avenue quizzes as training for the midterm and the final exam when you will be on your own, because the actual individual quizzes are not worth that much, but the midterm and final exam is worth the bulk of your grade.
Right.
And so if you are that person that just says, okay, just tell me the answer, you're kind of artificially being held up and you don't even realize how little you know.
Right. And considering that you're also directing, as you mentioned, for the Education and Cognition Lab, and I assume it's very connected with MacIntroPsych, for the viewers out there, could you talk a little bit about the main goals and projects that you're working on and how they may be able to, I guess, be implemented in MacIntroPsych?
Yeah, so we are interested in understanding how humans learn. So we take a perspective of cognition. So attention, memory, learning, executive function, working memory capacity, understanding the conditions that people learn best. How can we use that to apply to improve teaching and training conditions.
Right.
So one line of research my lab has been interested in is multimedia learning principles. So for example, you have to listen to a lecture. Does it matter what's on the slides? Actually, it does. So the experiment that we can do, for example, is that imagine I record the audio of a lecture and then I match it up with different slide decks. So one slide deck has just lots and lots of text, kind of almost like a redundant text situation. And that's actually a common template that a lot of instructors end up using. Another one where it's visuals, frameworks that support what is being said, right? Another condition where there's no text, nothing. Right. Turns out providing frameworks, pictures, visuals that support the narrative is the best thing. So that's something that you can demonstrate in a lab. You could also demonstrate it in an actual classroom conditions as well. And so that directly informs how I design my own PowerPoint slides. Right. Lots of other things that we've been interested in looking at. So for example, what is the best way to use learning objectives? So you've probably seen learning objectives. At the end of this chapter, you'll be able to do blank, blank, blank. And you probably just quickly read through it or you ignore it. So how useful are they? Well, I think they could be very useful, but you have to actually pay attention to it. So we had an experiment where we had students are about to read a chapter that they're unfamiliar with. Here's the classic learning objectives just presented. We had another condition where we took the exact same text, but we turned it into a multiple choice question. Right? So read the question stem and then you have to answer multiple choice question. They haven't read this material yet. They don't actually know it.
Right.
So most often they actually get these questions wrong. Right? So this is actually something that's called the pre-testing effect. So I get you to commit to an answer even before you actually know the material to give a very accurate answer. It turns out forcing you to commit yourself and think about the answer, you learn more. And so those students who had to read the chapter and they had to do this pre-quiz, even though they got most of them wrong, they learned more from reading that chapter compared to the group that was just given the learning objectives to begin with. And so the pre-testing effect is a really interesting principle that I'll use in my lecture sometime too, where I'll describe an experiment, right? And the best situation is when the finding is really counterintuitive. So if I'm talking about something like cognitive dissonance, I'll describe an experiment and then I'll get students to give a hypothesis. What do you think is going to happen? Which group will perform the best? And then even if they get it wrong, and then I reveal, well, this is what actually happened. Going through that exercise of committing yourself to an answer leads to more learning. And it's best for counterintuitive findings. So I'll give you a very simple example. Like, do you know what the capital of Australia is?
Melbourne.
What do you think?
No clue.
Can you name a city in Australia?
I don't want to.
Melbourne's a good guess.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Just any
for some reason, New Zealand keeps coming up. I know it's another country.
Okay. Why did you guess Melbourne?
Because Sydney's the obvious answer, and then I feel like Melbourne.
Okay.
May have heard it before.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Sydney and Melbourne are the two largest cities.
Yes.
Actually, neither is the capital of Australia.
That is.
The capital of Australia is Canberra.
I had no idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you will probably never forget this.
Yeah.
You're always going to remember that the capital of Australia is Canberra. Yeah. If I just told you from the beginning, the capital of Australia is Canberra, you thought, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. But the fact that I actually made you first guess a plausible answer and then revealed the counterintuitive finding to you, that's going to lock that in.
Interesting.
So that is the power of pre-testing.
So what if you have no answer?
So that's actually a really good question. So if I get you to learn something where you can't even come up with a plausible answer, then pre-testing will be ineffective. So for example, let's say you know nothing about string theory.
Right.
And then I give you, you're about to read a chapter on string theory, and then I give you a pre-test, questions on string, and you can't even give a plausible answer, there'll be no benefit.
Oh, interesting.
But if you are about to learn something where you can give some reasonable, plausible answer, and then you have to guess, and then you go through and you learn the correct answers, you will be better off.
Interesting.
And I really want to ask this question now that we're on the topic, I guess, of how people teach and perceive information based on your research. How have you personally, either anecdotally or based on the evidence that you've gotten through your lab or through papers you've read, how do people from the newer generations that are more exposed to technology and obviously went through the pandemic with that influx of screens and everything is delivered through the display essentially, how is their attention, how are the principles of attention grabbing applying to them relative to people from older generations?
So I guess the question you're asking, are generations today different
Yeah.
from previous generations? So I would say their brains are not different. So we don't evolve, in the span of like 20 years, right? So the hardware is exactly the same. The habits are different, right? So there's always been distractions, right? But the way that we use our time and the habits has changed. So, if you look at your screen time on your phone, you'll probably be shocked at just how much time you are spent, glued to looking at this screen. It trains you as well to become used to it, like the endless scroll, right? It probably is impacting sleeping behaviors. So if you have an app that's designed to like never end and to kind of keep you at a level of excitement and engagement, it's hard for your body to wind down. Right. And so probably the worst thing that you can do before you go to bed is just flip through your phone.
Wow.
Right. Because it's just going to keep you at a higher level of arousal. And so you're trying to tell your body, okay, it's time to relax, lower your heart rate, slow things down, go to sleep, but your flight or fight response is being engaged, and excited, right? So that's going to be impacting you as well. And so I would say it's probably true that most people spend way too much time on their screens. They anticipate new, exciting news. So especially if you have your alerts on, sometimes people even experience like a phantom vibration. And
just go clutch their pocket.
Yeah, their phone is actually not going, but was that my phone? Notice like I was actually, before this interview, I was sending like a message to my wife, but then instead of leaving my phone here, I actually moved my phone away because I know, and research will show that even just having my phone here, even if I'm not picking it up, it can be distracting. Wow. So I'm trying to pay attention to this interview and these questions. If I had the phone in front of me, I might be looking and go, oh, I wonder, did it go off? Or is my wife sending me a message? So part of my mind will be distracted.
Wow.
So even in a lecture or learning scenario, it's best to put your phone away. Even if you don't pick it up, part of your mind is already being devoted to wondering what new might be coming.
Yeah. And just kind of wrapping everything up in a neat little bow here, just looking back at your educational academic career so far, what would you define as sort of your proudest accomplishment? I know it's kind of a hard question, but what is something that you often like to, I guess, wear proudly on your chest as sort of something you're proud of achieving?
I would say that Dr. Katia and I teach a gigantic course. I mean, I don't know of any course in North America that's as large as our course.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the first reaction of people would be like, it's so big. Like, they're probably thinking like, how good could the quality be
Right.
of the course? How good could the student experience be? But we put so much time, energy, and effort into every element of the course. So the web modules, they have to be really good. If we're asking people to engage in self-paced learning on their own, they've got to be really, really good. They've got to be funny.
Yeah.
They've got to be interesting. Like, our goal is like, even if you weren't in this course and you just had access to these web modules, maybe you would just watch them because it's that interesting. Maybe you would binge watch them, right? That's how much effort we put into it. The lectures. I want people to really show up. I want people to be talking about the lectures afterwards. Same thing with our tutorials. So in our lectures and our tutorials, we have over 90% attendance across the semester. People decide to show up, right? We do little things in our tutorials like, instead of just having these random problem-based learning activities, one day I decided, we should have recurring characters. And so we have recurring characters, and we actually have a storyline that changes every semester that connects across the semester. There's a midterm season finale. There's an end of semester season cliffhanger that's resolved in 1XX3 the next semester. So all these things, I think, really build goodwill in students. And, whenever I see students, people are like, they're really excited to see me.
Yeah.
And, so that makes me realize, like, I think we're doing good things.
Yeah, and I think I can definitely attest to all of the things you said. I mean, I still remember the first ever lecture I went to when we talked about the horse that would tap its
Clever
toes.
Hans?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I also remember all the wacky stories in the tutorial. They're so like out there that it just sticks in your head, like the stuff about Drake and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's always like current and keeping up with trends.
Yeah.
And whoever you have as your writer for these stories, I don't know if it's
It's our TAs.
It's your TAs.
Our
Yeah.
TAs
Yeah.
help to write all the storylines every year.
Yeah. Well, I guess just extend a thank you to them from us because they're doing a great job.
Yeah.
And I think you're doing an amazing job with your course. To this day, I don't think I've taken a more memorable course in my undergrad. It's really like a shame because that course happens in your first year and it kind of like sets a really high bar for the rest of my undergrad that all the other courses have not really I guess reached in terms of teaching, pure teaching quality, I would say.
So we're going to have to fix that.
Yeah, we definitely do. I agree. But yeah, thank you so much for coming down here today and sharing your story and your science with us, Dr. Kim. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we're really happy to have you on our show, and we'll see you next time on Office Hours Unplugged.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.